And here we go.
Hey.
Come on, you got to seize the goddamn gap.
People are so goddamn inefficient. Oh, god damn it! I don't care if you're old, seize the gap!
Hey, man, I gotta get going. I have some friends from my fantasy league coming over, so I should find my ride.
Hey, I like sports too. Yeah, I do, but I've never really engaged with the fantasy element of it.
Straight up now, tell me, is it gonna be you and me together? Or are you just having fun?
You know what, John? Cancel your ride. I'll drive you to your fantasy.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
And daily fantasy makes every game matter.
Jamie G, Magnum Mills, right here on the Joe Blow Football Show. And guess what time it is, baby? It's time for You Gotta Seize the Gap. That's right. Seize the Gap. Fantasy football coming at you week 4, Joe Blow Football Show. We got a lot to discuss. Let's get right into it. Magnum Mills, I want to start with quarterbacks, bro. A lot happened in week 3. Let's go right into week 4. Let's start with Chicago. And our boy, the Ginge, Andy Dalton. Still got the knee, okay? I don't think he's going to play this week. They got a real question here. Justin Fields completely face-planted. I mean, he looked terrible. It wasn't all his fault, but let's just be real. That was a horrible display.
Correct.
Does Big Dick Nick potentially come in here? Is there a chance to get a Big Dick sighting here?
That's what she said.
There is. I mean, that's what Matt Nagy's saying now that all 3 quarterbacks are an option to start. I do, at this point, think that they probably will start Dalton if he is healthy enough to go, because you can't destroy Justin Fields. I worry that this coaching staff won't be around next year, so they might do some dumb stuff to try to keep their jobs by putting Fields in there and like say, oh, we're taking our lumps playing a rookie or something. So just please, as a dynasty guy, football fan, don't hurt Justin Fields. Don't put him out there and make him try to play the Andy Dalton offense. Put him out there, move him around, give him a chance if he's going to play. To that point, I would say if you were rostering Justin Fields, it's kind of, he shouldn't have been your starting quarterback. If you had him on a roster because he was a high upside backup guy, wait 1 more week. Don't cut him quite yet because he could go nuclear against Detroit. Entirely possible. I'd hold on 1 more week. It would take some stones to start him. But if he goes nuts, you never know. You might be able to trade him or something. Maybe he gets a guarantee to keep the job. Who knows? So I wouldn't quite cut bait yet. But if Dalton starts, I'm not starting Dalton or Folds versus Lions unless it's in like a 2 quarterback league and you absolutely had nothing else.
Got it. Derek Carr. I think we can all agree that the time has come. Derek Carr legitimately deserves to be picked up, right? This is a guy that has performed 3 weeks in a row. They somehow continue to win games, and he has looked the part. He should be added, right, Mills?
Yeah, I would say in almost all 1 quarterback leagues, you should find a way to get him on your roster. He's been performing like a back end, actually more like a mid-range quarterback 1, but I think he could maintain that kind of back end quarterback 1 value. He had a quietly good high-end quarterback 2 season last year, and you can make the argument now he should be rostered over someone, say, like Ryan Tannehill, who is definitely owned in more leagues, definitely, I would say, than over Trevor Lawrence, over Baker Mayfield. In that same category of a veteran that might be out there, but, he might not be your starting guy, but you should pick him up, and that's Kirk Cousins. He
Absolutely
has been balling out, really. I mean, he has shown he can do this for stretches and then disappear, but he's got 2 good receivers, strong running game. It looks like they're trying to work either Ty Conklin or the 3rd wide receiver cat up there in. So, if Cousins is out there, I don't know if you're running out to start him this week, but he's at least worth picking up at this point. If your team is that good that you can't fit him, so be it. But I would guess most teams, you can squeeze out a spot at the end of your bench for him if he's out there.
I couldn't agree more. Let's talk about some week 4 streaming options here at the quarterback position. Even though they got their asses beat, the Heineken, we got inside the mine again, opened up a Heineken, dude. I mean, he performed last week from a fantasy standpoint, and I think that continues heading into week 4, right? Taylor Heineke is a legitimate week 4 streaming option. You agree?
Yeah, he's at Atlanta here. I mean, that's really solid. He's home versus Saints in week 5, who have, been pretty good on defense, but they also got lit up by Sam Darnold. And then in week 6, he's home against the Chiefs, who have been literally lit up by everybody. So he's actually profiles as a good streaming option for the next 3 weeks. So if you're in a fab league, even a 1 quarterback league, I'd spend maybe 2 to 5% of your fab on him. Pretty similar to what I'd spend with Carr and Cousins. I like Carr and Cousins more long-term, but Heineken is definitely the guy you're going to, if you need a starter, maximize your points this week, I'm still probably rolling with him. And I mentioned him, a minute ago, but Sam Darnold, he's at Dallas this week. he's offered a pretty high floor so far. The Cowboys' profile is a fairly high-scoring offense. They've been involved in mostly shootouts, although the game with the Chargers was a little bit of disappointment. Again, Darnold also has some decent matchups with home against the Eagles in Week 5, then versus Vikings Week 6, but more importantly, at the Giants in Week 7 and Atlanta Week 8. So if you're looking for, again, not a lot in there, you don't have a Cousins or Carr out there, and you can pick up Darnold. I go ahead, burn like 2 to 4% of your fab, pick him up, and you should be able to use him at least a couple times over the next month.
All about the free agent acquisition budget, baby. It's that fab. Let's move on to running backs. Not great news coming out of New England here for James White. He was carted off with a hip injury. I mean, that looks kind of like that's going to be a longer term thing. Obviously, it could be, IR, could be back in, 4, maybe 8 weeks. But needless to say, Mills, who should we be looking at here? Does JJ Taylor come to life for us a little bit? I mean, does Damian Harris become a bona fide RB1? Does the Rook Stevenson? I mean, what's going on in New England with the James White injury?
Oh, let's make this as simple as New England running back situation could be. It's complicated.
That's what she said.
Realistically, White had a hip subluxation, more or less the same injury Fitzpatrick had. It'll depend if he has surgery, but he will definitely go on IR and more likely than not miss the rest of the season. It's going to be harder for a running back to come back from that than a quarterback. JJ Taylor is your creeper ad. I wouldn't spend more than 1 or 2% of your fab on him because at best he's going to kind of get be the James White light. I can't imagine they will give him as many targets. It does seem that the most likely thing is that Damian Harris just sees his role grow a bit, and they kind of rotate the backs in situationally, kind of hot hand role for that James White thing. But it does mean that rookie Ramondre Stevenson should at least make it back on the active roster on game day. So if he was dropped in a deeper league, we're scooping up, tucking on the back of your bench. He's still more of a Harris handcuff. But he showed in the preseason he can catch the ball a little bit. So, again, if you just want to try to throw 1% of your fab out there, add him, see what happens, not a bad guy to be invested in.
It is complicated. Let's move on to Minnesota. Delvin Cook, 50-50 this week. He sat out last week. Not a ton, yet. I think we'll find out more as the week progresses, but he is 50-50. Elijah Mitchell. Now he's questionable, but even if he comes back, Mills, is the Sermon still in session here? Is Trey Sermon still a guy?
I would think so. For the most part, they've already said they're going to go with the hot hand. I'm not sure that Sermon did enough to be like, he's the guy until further notice or anything. When Mitchell did kind of look that good in week 1. But I would think they probably come back to, again, the same kind of situation where they're going to play both guys, see who gets hot. And they could work in, a Kerryon Johnson type that, Jacques Patrick, who they just signed. So they have a couple of the guys on the roster. So, I mean, this is the 49ers. You never know, but both should be owned in pretty much every league. Elijah Mitchell and Trey Sermon. And if you're in a real deep league, like a 16-team Skanky league, they're, they call him the Swiss Army knife. It's the dude that Booger McFarland, almost, died professing his love over on Monday Night Football a couple of years ago. That's Kyle Juszczyk. He's kind of an H-back for them. He actually operated more or less as the third down back, scored a touchdown. So if you're in a deep 16-team PPR league, I maybe even go up to 5% of my fab on him because in those leagues, you can almost never find anything. And there's a non-zero chance that he just kind of eke out a little PPR roll. It catches, 3-4 passes a game, gets 5 or 6 touchdowns on the year. It's not going to be sexy, but, you're in a deep league like that. Sometimes you need all the help you can get.
Absolutely. Carl, Harvard grad. And I just think we should nickname Trey Sermon, Eric Sermon, EPMD up in here. Let's move on to the generic Eric.
This guy raps like his parents jerked him. He sounds like Eric Sermon, the generic version. This whole crowd looks suspicious. It's all dudes in here, except for these bitches.
Let's move on. Josh Jacobs. He's likely back for week 4, but I think he's going to be limited. And believe it or not, Peyton Barber showed last week. The Barber, the Kenyon Drake. Is this going to be another running back by committee situation, in your opinion, Mills?
I think basically what happened is Jacobs went out. Barber more or less took the Jacobs role, and Drake stayed static in his current role. So you know what Drake is going to be. I mean, Barber, again, you're in a deep Skanky league, and you're thinking of literally picking up Bishop Skanky. Go ahead, add Peyton Barber, plug your nose, don't spend a lot of your fab, and don't expect much. This is the best. You just saw the best game of the year. I'm almost bloody positive. So again, there are leagues where you're desperate, but that's it. Don't go chasing waterfalls. Stick to the rivers and lakes that you used to.
That's right. Ain't that the truth? Let's go to the Rams. We've got Darrell Henderson. He's 50-50 to come back this week. Is this a week, whether he comes back or not, we should be eyeing up Sony Michel?
Yeah, Michelle was picked up in a lot of leagues already, but again, he's one of those guys that are out there. Whether or not you own Henderson, I'd probably burn 20-30% of your fab because there is a chance that he does leapfrog Henderson for the role. They did trade 2 draft picks for him. His former first round pick. His main struggle has been with knee injuries, not necessarily that he's not talented. He can catch the ball better than advertised. So there is a chance that either Henderson has a rib cartilage injury, which can linger, or Sony just legitimately jumps ahead of him, kind of like last year it was Darrell Henderson for a while until Cam Akers jumped him. So if he's out there, he's worth picking up. I don't know that you can run to start him this week. There's a chance it devolves into a timeshare where you can't start either. But the running back position is not the greatest. So if he's out there, burn, like I said, about that 25% area of your fab, pick him up, see what happens.
Let's go for the big one. That's what she said, and that's C-Mac himself, Christian McCaffrey. He had the injury on Thursday night, and it looks like he's going to be out likely 1 to 3 weeks here. I mean, I think we've got a dun priority ad, and that is
somebody gotta be there when it gets ugly. Somebody gotta be there when it gets bloody. Somebody got to get their hands dirty.
Your guy, the Ginger's guy, Chuba Hubbard, right? He looked the part a little bit on Thursday night as they started to take that game into control. This has got to be a priority ad.
Yeah, I mean, he's a little bit of a divisive prospect. A lot of people thought he should have come out of college here before he did. Had he done so, he might have been, a first-round running back pick in a draft that was absolutely loaded with running backs, as opposed to him coming out the year after and falling into the 4th round after a bunch of backs that he might be better than. It does look like the Panthers, they did work Royce Freeman in a bit, but they were also working Hubbard in, a bit with McCaffrey, at least more so than in the past. I mean, this is it really. I mean, we saw last year, Christian McCaffrey went down. Mike Davis, who I would say is an inferior talent to Chuba Hubbard, came in and was like the running back 12 on the year. There's no way you can ignore this. I mean, McCaffrey went out last year with the same thing. It wasn't supposed to be that much of a long-term injury. They have said they're not going to put him on IR, which gives you the time frame of the 1 to 3 weeks, because if it was going to be longer than that, they might as well put him on IR and gain the roster spot. So, yeah, I mean, if Chuba's out there, man, I would say the minimum he's going to go for in most leagues is 50% of your fab, probably up to someone's going to burn like 95. If you can do $0 bids, so you're not locked out the rest of the season, I would go up to 90%. If you kind of capped at $1 bids, I'd say in that 75 to 85% range, because that's what it's going to take. It might only be a 2-week play, but it could be a league winning play. And on the waiver wire, you're either streaming defenses or trying to pick a wide receiver out of the a diamond out of the rough here or there, or you're just trying to hit on a backup running back. So here it is. Here's the backup running back. Goal number 1, the Terminator. If you get a piece of it, you can rename it.
But I'll bet you don't have enough hair on your ass to throw me another one.
Well, here it comes, Parkman. Hole number 1, the Terminator. You get a piece of it, you can rename it.
It's Chubba Wubba time, dude. Let's move on to the other James White and Gio Bernard, right? This is Tom Brady's James White in Tampa Bay. He started to have a couple explosive plays in that game and then went out late with the knee injury. Looks like he's going to be okay. Is this a guy we've been kind of keeping him on our radar? Anything changed with Gio Bernard, Mills, or is he still just on our radar?
Again, you're in a deeper PPR league. He probably should be owned on the back of the bench, but it's almost going to be impossible to predict when to use him because his basic role is he's the hurry up back for the Bucs. And they only really are doing that when they're in a very competitive game or they're down. If you can kind of predict those situations, the Rams game did to be one of those, and it did pay off in that. So it's kind of, again, like the Patriots thing where you used to call it like it was a James White game or a Sony Michel game. It's kind of where you're at. It does look like they're phasing out Ronald Jones a little bit, which at least shrinks it from, a 2-way to a 3-way. And if you've ever been in one of those, you're going to get more attention in the 2-way. So
that's what she said.
There's at least that going for you.
That's always true. You have to share when you're in a 3-way. It's the hardest part about being in a 3-way. Now, let's go Zach Moss. All right, this guy is absolutely exploded after being a healthy scratch week 1. He comes in week 2, scores 2 touchdowns, and then he delivers again in week 3. Now, this is great news for the Bills and for Zach Moss, but Mills, this kind of puts us back at square one where we can't trust anybody in the Buffalo Bills backfield, right? I mean, this just muddles the water here a little bit, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is Redman's 3rd album here. It's his Both should be owned, but neither should be started. It's a weird situation of they're too good to be on the waiver wire because if one gets hurt or one could have a spike game because it is a high-powered offense. As you've seen, it kind of, can Singletary bust a long run, can Moss get the goal line carry. So again, worth owning, especially as the bye weeks come up. But on the other hand, I can't, you go ahead and put, throw 5% of your fab at him. But for the most part, all you're going to do is give yourself a headache every week, whether or not trying to figure out to start him. If you need a running back that bad, go for it. But don't be expecting this kind of weekly production.
And to round out running backs, the last person I want to mention is Cordell Patterson. I love how they're using this guy in Atlanta. It's the one bright spot for Atlanta, in my opinion. And I think this is a guy that you should pick up here, right? If still available. And as in most leagues, he might be still available.
Yeah, I think absolutely, especially with Russell Gage being out now. They really don't have a true second wide receiver there. Matt Ryan is he's not throwing the ball deep at all. It's really killing Calvin Ridley. It's certainly not helping with Kyle Pitts. And it's kind of Cordell Patterson, and to a lesser degree, Mike Davis, who's being the beneficiary of a lot of these dump offs or whatever. And again, the only knock on Patterson was he wasn't a true receiver. They thought he was maybe too tall to be a running back or something. But I mean, Atlanta's just basically said, we don't really care. Like, well, he can run it some, we'll throw it to him some. And if he's going to keep getting around 15 touches, targets a game, yeah, dude, I'd rather have him than that, Gio Bernard, James White type, because he's basically that plus. Does he have it's basically, he's touchdown upside sucks on the Falcons. But other than that, running backs are hard to find. I would say there are a couple platforms out there where he only has wide receiver eligibility. On those platforms, I'm a fair bit less interested.
Got it. Let's move on to wide receiver. The big injury really was AJ Brown with the hamstring. He left week 3. It's highly likely the Titans sit him for at least a game or two here to get him 100%. We know those soft tissue injuries like hamstring can really linger. Who's a guy here that we should be looking for in Tennessee to maybe step into that role?
Really, it's probably Nick Westbrook, former wide receiver out of Indiana. He was a guy that won a lot of money for people in college DFS back in the day. Stuck with the Titans as an undrafted free agent last year. So he has been around for a while. It's kind of odd because they moved up to draft Des Fitzpatrick is currently on the practice squad. They got Josh Reynolds from the Rams in free agency, and he hasn't made an impact. So, yeah, I mean, I would say you can't really depend on this too much, but there is a chance, like if Julio misses a game, Nick Westbrook might be the number 1 wide receiver for the Titans. So he's going to fly pretty far under the radar, except in deep league. So deep league adjust accordingly. But I'd say mostly, you throw out that 2 to 5% of your fab, you could probably get him. And if nothing else, he's probably worth a stream in the near future. And who knows, maybe he turns into something. They were looking for a third wide receiver.
Absolutely, they'd love to be able to get more balance because it's been the Derrick Henry show, which is okay. Deontay Johnson, wide receiver out of Pittsburgh. He missed week 3 with the knee injury. Could miss again this week. The Steelers, again, they didn't place him on IR, so we know that's going to be less than, somewhere between 1 and 3 weeks. Otherwise, they would put him on IR. This is significant only because whether he returns or not, they've also banged up with Juju Smith-Schuster, right? So what's going on with him? Is this a rib injury?
Yeah, the latest update is he's day-to-day, which is, code for questionable. Again, it's going to be a pain tolerance thing. My guess would be, especially if Johnson is out, that Juju probably does suit up, but it's not guaranteed. If nothing else in deeper leagues, just put James Washington on your radar. Nothing more than 1% of your fab, because honestly, you really don't want any part of the Pittsburgh offense. But if it were to be Chase Claypool and James Washington as the 2 healthy wide receivers, I would expect Washington to do some more of the underneath stuff or whatever. And given Roethlisberger's on limitations, that probably makes him, the more attractive streamer for the week, if nothing else.
Absolutely. It looks like Antonio Brown's going to be back this week after we placed on the COVID list last week for Tampa Bay. Anything with this here? I mean, is this still kind of one of those things where Godwin, Evans, Gronk? I mean, there's just so many weapons there. I mean, does this change anything that he's back?
It does kill. Like, it turns out that Scotty Miller is now going to be out definitely with turf toe, and Tyler Johnson is a prospect I really love out of Syracuse. Had I think 4 grabs for 60 yards in the game on Sunday. And if Brown were out, he would be their 3rd wide receiver, and a guy I would be interested in. But from what I understand, the Bucs were 100% vaccinated as a team, which means AB was vaccinated, which means I expect him to be back this week. So, you can throw Tyler Johnson on your watch list in case one of the 3 receivers gets hurt in the future. But for now, you can only pick him up in Dynasty or in the deepest of leagues.
Yeah. T. Higgins missed week 3 for Cincinnati with shoulder injuries, questionable for week 4, something to keep an eye on there. We talked about them, going into Jacksonville on Thursday night to play that game. The Giants have some injuries, right? I mean, Sterling Shepard left the game with a hamstring injury this past week here in week 3. He's questionable. And then the same thing happened with Darius Slayton, left the game with a hamstring injury. So soft tissues are really starting to rear their ugly fucking head. What does this do for the rookie that the Giants took in the first round this past year? Is this a Kadarius sighting for us?
I mean, he's kind of a gadget guy. He was one of those, positionless kind of guys in college. Really only had one productive season as a wide receiver, kind of too old past the breakout age that a lot of guys thought. So he was a guy that a lot of people in dynasty community shied away from despite the first round draft capital. But unless who's the boy, CJ Board, unless they're going to really involve CJ Board, it's Galladay, and Tony has to get in there a little bit. He is a very talented athlete. My main problem is, like, if he would have gone to a team like the Saints or something, I would have liked it quite a bit because they could find a way to use an athlete like that. But yeah, Jason Garrett, not so much. Just ask him again. So I mean, as an NFC East fan, I don't want to lie and say I hate to say it, but it looks like the Giants are scheduled for another full teardown and rebuild. So good thing they got that extra pick in the draft instead of taking Justin Fields.
Yeah, good thing. There looks like they might need it. Curtis Samuel for Washington is somebody I was excited to see play in that offense. He's eligible to come off of IR this week, but doesn't look like he's going to make it. He's still doubtful. KJ Hamler suffered a torn ACL. He's out for the season. What does this do, particularly with Jerry Jeudy out? Now, Jerry Jeudy's coming back, but what does this do for Denver? Who's on our radar here?
He might have been picked up last week, but if Tim Patrick was not picked up, go ahead, make it so. I would probably go maybe up to 10% of fab, because if nothing else now, he is locked in as a wide receiver 3 even when Jeudy returns, the wide receiver 2 until then. He's basically been almost always productive in his career when given the chance, but for some reason, he's just a dude who gets no love. So give him a little love. If he's out there still, he probably should have been picked up last week. Rectify that now. Like I said, burn 5-10% of your fab, get him on your roster. Denver's got some good, the secondary and that all across the NFC West, the secondaries are not looking that great. So, and Teddy's been throwing the deep ball looking pretty decent. So I am definitely more optimistic now about the Broncos offense than I was at the outset of the season.
And Tim Patrick is in a contract year. We know what happens when dudes trying to get paid. Speaking of coming off IR, along with Curtis Samuel is Traquan Smith. He's eligible this week, but again, doubtful. Mills, who we got as a priority ad this week for you from a wide receiver standpoint?
Somebody gotta be there when it gets ugly. Somebody gotta be there when it gets bloody. Somebody got to get their hands dirty.
We talked about, Kadarius Toney in his first round draft capital. If we go back a year, go to the first wide receiver drafted in the entire draft, over C.D. Lamb, over Justin Jefferson, and that was Henry Ruggs for the Raiders. He was a noticeably raw prospect coming out and looked the part, really struggled last year. Basically, Nelson Aguilar had the role everyone thought Ruggs would have. And so far, he's looking a lot better this year. He's more involved in the offense, and more importantly, he's running a wider route tree. Basically, he's still not obviously the world's greatest route runner or whatever, but he's just not running straight down the field every time anymore, which is an improvement. He's been targeted around the red zone. Again, a lot of talent. Derek Carr's been playing really well, and no one else on that team really profiles as a number 1 wide receiver unless you got Darren Waller, who former wide receiver, maybe tight end. But yeah, if Ruggs is out there at this point, you got to at least take a stab on it, because he does have that crazy upside. So, out there, if you're in a, shallow league, maybe 5% of your fab, deeper league, go up to, maybe 15, maybe 17, 18%. Someone's going to pop for the Raiders, on that level. I would also say if he's still out there in a PPR league, Hunter Renfrow is not going to have a super high ceiling. He's going to give you like 8 to 12 points if he doesn't score a touchdown. If he scores a touchdown, he'll give you 16 to 18 points. He's not going to have those Cole Beasley games. Yes, he's right. Cole Beasley. There you go. Cole Beasley on an offense that probably won't score quite as many points, but also doesn't have as many options, mouths to feed. So again, PPR league, he's not sexy like, like 5 to, if he's still out there, you might have to go up to about 10% of your fab. But, again, if you leave it starts 3 wide receivers, PPR only, you could do a lot worse than Hunter Run further in that third wide receiver / flex spot.
Absolutely. speaking of the Bills and Cole Beasley, Emmanuel Sanders and Cole Beasley, they're both worthy. But the thing is you're going to go through so much trying to figure out which one's getting, the looks outside of Diggs. I mean, this is just a problem with the Bills offense having so many weapons and being so explosive. It gets spread around. It's hard to pick, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the advantage here. We're doing a drop ad show, not a sit start show. So I can just tell you that, yeah, all 4 Bills receivers should really be owned. Trying to figure out when to start them is going to be very difficult. But in most weeks, Josh Allen is going to support like at least 2 fantasy viable wide receivers. One's usually going to be Diggs, but if you can figure out who that second one is, it's going to pay off for you. So, again, if you're kind of rotating that third wide receiver, your flex spot, you need, again, they're going to be Bob plays, boom or bust. They're going to have low floors, high ceiling. And we saw Emmanuel Sanders hit the ceiling game, while at the same time, Cole Beasley still, while not scoring, managed to get like 20 PPR points because he had racked up like, 11 catches for 98 yards or whatever it was. So,
yep. It's Bobby, Digi, B-O-B. Last thing here, Christian Kirk, if he's still out there, I think we're both in agreement. He should probably be picked up. And then talk to me a little bit about Rondell Moore. I mean, if he's still available, same principle goes with
same thing. I think
offense.
Moore is going to have, again, he's kind of more the spike play game now. I think really what you're hoping for is that over the year, like AJ Green gets phased out a little bit more, but they do run a lot of 0 sets with 4 wide. But it does seem that Christian Kirk is kind of solidifying himself a little bit as a more consistent option than he did last year. Always been talented. So, if he was kind of left out there this far, he's proven to be kind of their version of a Hunter Renfrow or whatever. So, and it's like, offense that I expect to score a few more points. So again, still out there like that 6 to 12, maybe up to 15% of your fab. Rondell Moore, just dial it down like 5 to 10%. And a guy who was drafted probably somewhere between like the 8th and 10th round, but might be out there in the waiver wire is Will Fuller. Jacoby Brisket did not look super cooked. So again, Fuller, very talented, almost always has been very good when healthy. If he's out there, the Dolphins situation isn't the greatest, but again, I'd throw 5, 10, 12% of your fab out there because no one's probably going out and dying to buy a Dolphins wide receiver right now. Put him on the end of your bench and see what happens.
Will Fuller V, baby. Let's move on to tight end. Anthony Fursker could return this week to Tennessee, and I think they could use him here to create another weapon for Tannehill. Jonnu Smith leaving, I think, has kind of shown up a little bit in Tannehill's production. They were involved, right? I mean, so thoughts with this, especially with AJ Brown being out.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much. First, people had some hope for him because again, they didn't adequately replace the third receiver or the tight end when Smith left, and people thought Further could be that guy. He's been hurt the last 2 weeks, but with AJ Brown looking like he's going to be out now, Julio kind of, being a little bit touch and go. Further could profile as one of their better pass catchers. He's been cut in a lot of leagues. You could pick him up again. You probably like 2% of your fab, 3%, something real low. Pick him up. Maybe he plays this week. Maybe he doesn't. But if Brown's out, someone's got to eat, and they got a good matchup this coming up. So.
Yeah, and speaking of injuries, we talked about the Giants really dealing with the soft tissue injuries with the hamstrings on both Darius Slayton, Sterling Shepard. Is this an Evan Ingram opportunity here to?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, he was still like in his first week back, first game of the year, he was second on the Giants with 6 targets. Was a little bit of that due to the injuries, maybe, but again, he's another guy that's basically a big wide receiver playing tight end. Got 1,000 yards as a rookie, has really just struggled with injuries and getting targets. And right now, he seems to be as healthy as he's been, and the targets could be there. So, yeah, if he's out there, I'd say, 8, 15, 17% of your fab because he has a legitimate back end tight end 1 upside and just do tight ends at wasteland. So if somebody cut him, go pick him up. Maybe you don't start him this week, but again, if Slayton and Shepard are out, I think he's a good stream.
We talked about Jacoby Brissett with the brisket being, half smoked. One thing that I thought was interesting was he clearly looked to target Mike Gesicki, and I think that may prove well here. And again, tight ends are hard to come by outside of the big 3. So Mike Gesicki could be in play here this week too as we move forward with the Jacoby Brissett show in Miami.
Yeah, basically very similar to Evan Ingram, except for I think there's just more competition for targets on the Dolphins.
Yep. Speaking of quarterbacks that are playing pretty well. My guy Kirk Cousins in Minnesota. Tyler Conklin, is this a guy that we should be on our radar here?
If nothing else, it seems that he's definitively won the battle with Chris Herndon to be the clear tight end one with Irv Smith out. And for all that Kirk Cousins has done, he's not spreading the ball out. I think he targeted 5 guys last week. And I'm not talking like he went out for a burger. I mean, he only targeted 5 tight ends, running backs, and wide receivers on his passes. And Conklin, I think, was like 3rd on the team with 6 targets. So again, tight end is Bishop Skanky out there. If he's out there, I wouldn't go crazy with your fab. Probably keep it under 5%. But he'd be worth picking up. That seems like, what was KJ Osborne before? It was his turn this week, but it does seem like they're going to take a turn with there being some sort of 3rd guy in there.
That's what she
right
said.
now, him and Osborne seem the most likely options.
Yeah. Well, we talked a lot about the Bills and the playmakers they have on offense, but I've got to give a little bit of due. I've been super hard on Dawson Knox, and it's time for me to go to Knox Landing here, be in Dawson's Creek, and give him a little bit of love. He has been playing pretty good for what he is, right? I mean, they've got 4 legitimate good wide receivers ahead of him. They've got 2 running backs that they use. He's kind of in the middle, and what he's proven to be is a little bit of a red zone threat here for Josh Allen. And so, as Mills, what would you say, what are you spending on a guy like Dawson Knox from a fab standpoint?
Yeah, I'm probably, again, keeping it in that, 2 to 5% range, just basically because Knox isn't going to be a high ceiling player, but he's looking like he's going to have a decent floor in that. Most weeks, he's probably going to catch 2 to 3 balls for, 30, 40 yards, which is your, for tight end PPR, there's your 6-7 points, but he's also, again, like you pointed out, a good red zone target. At the end of the year, he could be kind of like a Robert Tonyan light, where he's not going to have a ton of receptions or yardage. If you turn around, he's got, 8 touchdown catches or something. And, for a fantasy owner, that's, that my profile is, probably at the worst case, like a high end, tight end 2 or something like that. And right now, man, it's a week to week proposition. So you could do worse than, throwing Knox in there, hoping he gets that TD and get you that, 10, 12 points.
Absolutely. Now, we've been avoiding the Steelers offense like the freaking pandemic here, like it's just filled with COVID. But is Pat Freiermuth, I mean, the rookie they got here, is he kind of the guy now there over Ebron? I mean, what are you looking at from him from an add-on standpoint here?
I would say, if you were owning Ebron, I would drop Ebron for him. He's been operating slightly ahead of Ebron, and especially I think coming up here, if you're going to have both of the wide receivers and Johnson and Juju out, that would open up targets. He does seem, Roethlisberger has always liked his tight ends in the red zone. I would put him right there with Dawson Knox, basically. I feel confident he's going to be in that 2 to 3, maybe 4 catches per game range, not a lot of yardage, but will be a decent red zone threat. So, 2 to 4% of your fab, something like that. He's not a guy you want to start every week, but if the matchup looks good or you don't have another option at tight end, you can do worse.
And the last one I want to talk about is Dan Arnold. Now, news just broke that the Sam Darnold, Dan Arnold, or as I like to call it, the Sam Arnold, Dan Darnold combination is no longer going to be. His ass is off the Panthers and shipped down to Florida. That's right. He's going to play for the Jacksonville Jaguars going forward. But this could be good for him from a red zone target standpoint, right? Kind of same thing here. I mean, he's a serviceable tight end too, right? I mean, that's coming hard.
Yeah, it is. He had moments of relevance with the Cardinals last year. He still had 1 good game for the Panthers this year. Pretty much, you're thinking you saw what James O'Shaughnessy did for the Jaguars. He was more or less a decent tight end too, and I think Arnold could do that. If you did see a receiver go down, maybe he gets a little bit of a target share bump. Again, if you're in a super deep league, just something to keep an eye on. It does seem like the Jaguars are more committed to using a tight end, even if they don't really have a good one. They're still trying, that's just maybe the way Aaron Meyer runs his offense. So again, deeper league, speculative ad, like 1% of your fab. You don't have to even do it this week, maybe, but just keep it in the back of your head. They thought enough to trade for the dude. So
yeah,
it's at least worth noting.
Yeah, no, it's a real thing. Let's move on to defense, special teams. Let's talk about some streaming options. That's right, the streaming, baby. Week 4, Mills. Talk to me about Cincinnati, dude. Is this might be a decent option here again, Thursday Night Football against the Jags, right?
Yeah, it's again, I would say a lot of times I would favor the defense on the short week. So I'm not, Trevor Lawrence is, he's had his moments, but he's also turned the ball over quite a bit, throwing a lot of passes he shouldn't throw, taking some bad sacks. Cincinnati did a good job against Pittsburgh last week, so I'm there for it, man. And I wouldn't go nuts again. Any streaming defense, I'm not generally going more than 4 or 5% of your fab, and that's usually at the high end when I'm expecting to use them for multiple weeks. For what it's worth, that the Bengals are at Detroit in week 6 and at the Jets in week 8. So if you had the kind of roster space to carry 2 defenses or something, you could use them a couple of times coming up. I will say, it's just in the we're always picking on them category. You have the Bears playing against Detroit this week. I don't really love the schedule, but Goff still turn it over. They're giving up sacks. The left tackle Taylor Lewan will be out this week, so they can't improve the picture for the Lions. So, again, 1-2% of your fab. Chicago's 1 week starter, and the other team we like to pick on, the Jets. You got the Titans again. Not the best defense, but again, you probably get it for 2-3% of your fab running this week. And my little note on this was they're playing the Jets.
They're playing the Jets, and Zach Wilson has been throwing the football to the opposite team.
Correct.
Like it's running out of style. So I mean, that's a legitimate option right there. What about New Orleans here heading up to the Giants? I mean, they've proven kind of to be a high end, fantasy defense special team so far. How do you like them here? And then the following week they head to Washington. So this could potentially be a 2-week stream play here, right?
Yeah, I think the Saints are probably one of those teams I would go to that 4 or 5% for. I would believe in most leagues right now, they're probably a top 3 fantasy defense. And every year you see a team like this that's pretty good and no one kind of buys into it till it's too late. Maybe it was like the Bucks or the Colts last year. Everyone's like, oh, they're pretty good. But then you look at the matchups, like, oh, I don't know. And then at the end of the year, you're like, oh, they were basically an every week starter. So at this point, I believe they put up like double-digit points in most fantasy leagues each of the first 3 weeks, even when they were getting crushed. So, yeah, I would say the Saints are probably out there. I would say if you need a long-term, you want to plug it in and forget it, they're the best of the bunch for that. And probably the last stream would be a defense that got slaughtered this week in the football team. But again, they play Matty Meltz in them. And, every once in a while he makes a play. They have those playmakers, but he's also throwing some bad passes. I believe 2 pick sixes already on the year. So I am more than fine with picking on the Falcons. And just for the record, on week 5, they go ahead and they play the Saints. And we've seen Jameis play great. And we've also seen Jameis, get a little Jameis with it, including even the touchdown he threw last week to Marquez Callaway. I mean, even the announcers were amazed. They're like, there's no way. And, when they asked Jameis after the game, depending on how old you are, was either the Nas or the Drake, he just said it was God's plan.
Yeah.
That's how that ball got to Marquez Callaway.
That tells you all you need to know about the age standpoint there. We got a lot covered here in Seize the Gap Fantasy Football. If you're not following us, liking and subscribing to the Joe Blow Football Show, you're missing the boat. We are going to help you win your championship, beat up on your friends, make that Skrilla, and just stay competitive and relevant year-round because we got that info for you. Magnum Mills, where should they find our beautiful, beautiful asses?
As the man with the glow said, please like and subscribe and comment. If you have a question, please hit us up on Twitter, hit us up on Insta, drop it in the comments of this video. You can find all our videos at joeblowfootballshow.com. You can interact with us on Twitter at SeizeTheGapFF or at Joe Blow Show. Like I said, Instagram and Twitter. And we occasionally do some Twitch streams, which is at Joe Blow Football Show. And I don't care if you're old, you gotta seize the goddamn gap.
Gotta seize the gap. We're back with more Joe Blow Football Show.
Hot one, isn't it?
I'm rich, bitch.
shades of gray. I pray all sin fade away, seldom praise him for the sunny days. And like his promise is true, only my faith can undo the many chances I blew to bring my life to an end. Clear blue and unconditional skies have dried the tears from my eyes. No one lonely cries. My only bleeding hope is for the folk who can't cope with such an enduring pain that it keeps them in the pouring rain. Who's to blame for tooting gain into your own vein? What a shame you shoot and aim for someone else's brain. You claim the insane and aim to stay in time for falling prey to crime. I say the system got you victim to your own mind. Dreams are hopeless aspirations and hopes are coming true. Believe in yourself, the rest is up to me and you. Go chasing waterfalls. Please stick to the rivers and the lakes that you're used to. I know that you're gonna have it your way or nothing at all, but I think you're moving too fast. Go chasing waterfalls. Please stick to the rivers and the lakes that you're used to. I know that you're gonna have it your way or nothing at all.
Come on, you got to seize the goddamn gap.